I'm going to discuss selected examples from contemporary performing and media art that are explicitly based on the legacy of avant-garde art. I'm focusing on their understanding of the space by which these artworks gain a certain continuation and upgrading of the basic avant-garde aspirations on which they rely on. Thus, I firstly analyzed the function and the role of space in the works of two Slovenian artists, Dragan Živadinov and Marko Pelhan. By Živadinov, the work in focus is his post-gravity performance Nordung from 1995 onwards. By Živadinov, is Pelhan's MacroLab, a pioneering platform for other art projects. Both are coming from Slovenia and are educated in theater directing, but they have abandoned the traditional theater directing and dedicated themselves to contemporary and new media art with a special attention to the sky. Both artists sought their inspiration in the Russian avant-garde, but each of them pursued different issues in it. While Živadinov's post-gravity work focuses primarily on the issues of gravity and abstract art that will gain its accomplishment in outer space, free from the constraints of terrestrial conditions. Pelhan's project MacroLab, on the other side, is oriented towards a critical stance of contemporary power structures. In both, particular importance has been attributed to the notion of space, which, especially in the case of Pelhan, is also data space, since MacroLab, as a complex and autopoietic system environment, tries to intercept and analyze data from various systems. For example, communication, climate, migration system. In Živadinov's case, by launching the artwork into outer space, into the orbit, we encounter a fall upwards and therefore a complete reorganization of vision, if we cite here Paul Virilio. But we will first take a look at Živadinov. He calls himself a post-gravity artist, and for him the gravity is the last problematic planetary force and one of the basic mimetic morphological forces, as he wrote in his manifesto. His notion of post-gravity art derives from the tradition of historical avant-garde, and especially from Malevich's desire that art should enter the vastness of infinite outer space, where it will reach its true and final accomplishment as an absolute abstract entity. This manifesto is the 50 coordinates of post-gravity art, is a part of Živadinov's artistic research, which began in the 90s, and whose final goal is to abolish art as we know it and transfer it into outer space, cosmos, where it will begin to lead a new, free and independent life as we do not know it yet. The liberation of gravity from the forces of gravity was achieved already in 1999. Here is the photo from the performance Biomechanics Nordung, one of the first performances in the conditions of weightlessness, which was performed in the stratosphere above Moscow in a special aircraft for parabolic flights. Means the flights that are commonly used for the training of the cosmonauts. Another project to mention, as was mentioned in this 50-year theater performance, We heard much about it yesterday in the paper by Mojca Kuncer, so I will not say much about it here. The first performance took place in Ljubljana in 1995 with 14 actresses and actors, and there are 5 reprises planned over the next 50 years. The plan was also realized in this manner. When some of the actors die, he or she will be replaced by a remote controlled sign, in fact a kind of robot. And during the 5th and last reprise, scheduled for 2045, for 20th April, the director's Živadinov's vision predicts that all the actors will be deceased. The stage will be full of symbols, rhythms and sounds, while the only one alive will be Živadinov himself. And then he will use a spacecraft to convey all 14 satellites, robots, onboards. That means the techno remains of the deceased actors into the geostatic orbit above the Earth and commit a suicide. This is in brief the plan of Živadinov's performance in progress, by which he will abolish not only himself, but first and foremost mimetic representational theatre. By launching into zero gravity, the art project will reach its final and true accomplishment as an absolute abstract entity, and thus realize Maljevich's claim for pure abstract art. For Živadinov, gravity is not conceived only in the physical sense, but it is that fatal force that obstructs the liberation of man, art and thinking. One of the predecessors of such art can be traced back to Italian futurism, to the aerial theatre, but we do not have time here to dig into this much in thorough. Shall we now go to Marko Pelhan? His work as a conceptual artist and researcher is influenced by Italian and Russian futurism, especially by the poetry of Velimir Hlebnikov. He is also referring, Pelhan, to the pioneering engineer Nikola Tesla, Situationist International, Solaris by Stanislav Lem and later Andrei Tarkovsky movie, and so on. A theoretician Inke Arens describes his art projects by the term retro-utopianism, by which she pointed at the paradoxical interconnectedness of media-archaeological fascination for the avant-garde's early utopian fantasies of technology. Instead of previous negative political totalitarian aftertaste, utopian thinking is now understood more positively as an emancipatory or visionary spectral potentiality after Arens. His project MacroLab, conceived earlier in 1994, the project by Pelhan and his team at Projektih Institute was first presented at Documenta 10 in Kassel in 1997, developed as an ongoing mobile laboratory for research of scientists, artists, and tactic media workers. It operated in several remote and also inhabited areas in Scottish Highlands, in Western Australia, as well as in Venice Lagoon as part of Venice Biennale in 2003, and also in Antarctica. It has been conceived as an autopoetical, self-sufficient working and living unit designed for the long living in isolated and hostile environment, and was able to host 7 researchers or artists or engineers at once. It was meant to explore global communications, weather and climate and migration systems as the 3 complex and interrelated domains that define the inner workings of holistic planetary systems. This was the quote from Pilhan himself. There are also some views back to the avant-garde. The art project constituted one of the phases in a work cycle titled Ladomir Factura. It was the first name of this Ladomir is the reference of Chlebnikov's futurist poem with the same title, Ladomir. At the beginning of the 20th century, the Russian poet Chlebnikov described the destruction of the old world through the wars and the new world emerging from the ruins of the old one, a typical avant-garde motif. The second part of the name, Factura, is the reference to the school of Russian formalism in literary theory. It's their term roughly describing the interface. In the platform Macro Lab, Pilhan is dealing with the immaterial structure of space, which has become increasingly important since the beginning of the 20th century. By tracing and mapping the immaterial territory of signals floating in chaos, he unravels the invisible but omnipresent power structures. This is in the core of this strategy, to draw attention and make visible the data space surrounding us, which has been otherwise the exclusive zone controlled by military or political or economical power structures. Another interesting articulation of avant-garde aspirations in terms of space can be seen in a series of live reenactments of seminal neo-avant-garde performances in virtual environments. There is a slide of one of these projects, 2 of these projects. The first one is really made after the famous Chris Burden's performance piece shoot from 1970s. But the second one is the piece made by this team, Eva and Franco Mates, Italian artist team. It is not a reenactment, but it's their performance made after these seminal performances. But there is another one I should and I would mention. It is made by the artist Gazira Babeli. This is a virtual artist, born in Second Life in 2006. Second Life is a 3-dimensional virtual world, in fact a multiplayer online game. Now it's a bit out of mode, but anyway, there are several art projects that were made within this platform. Gazira Babeli is the artist that exists and performs only within Second Life, while the creator of her identity remains hidden. In this performance, Come to Heaven, she stages a simple question. What happens if she throws her body from above, from millions of meters high, against the force of gravity and at a speed of 900 kilometers per hour? In some cases, the performing space shatters and disintegrates, and her body is hard to recognize as the body. In other cases, the visual reference on Gazira's body remains, but her limbs multiply in a weird way while her body is changing into a massive pulp of multiplied eyes and hair. To subdue the body to extreme conditions of high speed, comparable to an airplane's one, testing the borders of the body's endurance, exploring its capabilities. This is all very close to the endeavors of body art in the 70s. But this action is real only within Second Life. There are also some allusions to Yves Klein's photograph, A Leap into the Void. Within Second Life, the action is not performed by a live performance body, however, here is the avatar's body flying through the space, but the moments of unpredictability and uniqueness that were crucial for historical body art still persist. The test of the endurance and performance of Gazira's body is in fact the test of the endurance and the performance of the graphics card installed on the computer being used and its reactions according to extreme conditions. The performance cannot be repeated in exactly the same way. Its versions exist due to the fact that it is impossible to predict how the graphics card will behave. Therefore, an interface that has been gaining more and more importance in today's culture in general, that is changing into interface software and algorithmic culture. So, many possibilities of interpretation arise here, but we will conclude now. Through these examples, the issues of space as well as embodiment, of audience, of liveness, and attitude to history are addressed in a particular yet uncommon way. Along with the emergence of new spaces, which are also suitable for artistic explorations, these art projects allude also to the specific position of the body. All these spaces, be it sky, outer space, virtual work, cannot be perceived and experienced directly by our senses and bodies. Other forms of embodiment that extend the human body come to the fore. These are technological prostheses, interfaces, probes, avatars. With the help of body schemas notion by Merleau-Ponty, they can be understood as extending body's area of sensitivity. There are also several other aspects as scientific abstraction which proved to be necessary to reach and examine all this our understanding of all these spaces is based on large amounts of scientific data which are transmitted and translated into visualizations, since these spaces are in fact abstract, constructed, and in some way inaccessible to naked eye perception. Thank you.